we are joined by the one, the only Eric Nicksick, Coach of the Year. He's any pay-per-view that you put on these days, any fight card at the Apex, there he is. He's got 1 million fights. He's one of the busiest men, one of the best coaches, all-round good guy. Eric Nicksick, welcome to the Believe You Me podcast.
Man, I'm so excited to be here. I got my boy Felder, the ginger twin of mine. This is amazing. This is amazing.
Long lost brothers, Eric.
Long lost brother. What up, Bisping?
How you doing, man? I'm good. Hey, how many fights did you have on Saturday night?
None this past Saturday. We had Johnny Walker, but he got hurt the weekend before. We had 3 there from the gym. So Puna, Chris Curtis.
You were at the fights though.
I didn't go. The moment I have a weekend off, man, I'm like you. I'm like, dude, get me away from fighting. I'm chilling. I'm trying to be a dad, you know?
Yeah.
I could have swore I saw you there in Marab's corner or something. I'm like,
that's John Wood, probably. Same. We got mullets.
I do get you guys mixed up a few times. You know, I used to anyway. So anyway, Hey, UFC 311. We were just talking about Islam Makhachev. And what does he do next? If you were coaching Islam, what would your advice be?
Super fights. I would move him up. Just because of the kid wants challenges, right? And I get the Bilal Muhammad relationship. That is tough because you care about people in this sport, especially guys you train with. But there are some matches I think at welterweight that do make sense for him. And maybe it's not a title fight right away, but like a guy like Sean Brady comes to mind, a guy that like matchup wise that, hey, maybe he gets his feet wet at welterweight. Or that super fight where you make a Topuria and him at 155. There's some options I think that you can do for him and make that money, man. Maximize your championship level right now and get paid while you can.
Well, Eric, don't you think, like, if you're Islam, and I love the idea of that fight with Topuria, right? It's fascinating, and Topuria has done some work at 45, but if Islam wasn't as dominant as he is, I think that would make sense. But if you're Islam, do you want to give another 45er a chance? Doesn't give him the chance to get that second piece of gold. And I think that's what he really wants. Is it, you know what I mean? If you're their coach, do you think, all right, I don't want him to have to take on a lighter guy. I want him to fight up, even if it's not for the belt.
100%. Couldn't agree more. And I think there's a reason why you're hearing that side, that camp, chirp it out a little bit more. You hear it a little bit more. Well, if I have to fight Bilal, I think they're just almost kind of making it right in their own heads if that does come to fruition. But we're all competitors, right? Like I watched Randy fight guys in our room that were teammates of ours, and it had nothing to be personal against that person. It was like, dude, I just want to be the best. I want to compete against the best. And how can you fault a guy whether you have to put that friendship aside for a camp and you go and fight this individual? At the end of the day, it's all love, but dude, I'm trying to win. I'm trying to be the best that I can be. I don't want to hold myself back because of a friendship.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, John. As a coach, is this a crazy statement? Because I said this yesterday. I was doing another show. Okay, he's friends with Bilal. How about doing something nobody's ever done? And say, I want to skip 2 weight classes. I want to go up to 185. Is that absolute lunacy? Or is that the most exciting, wild shit that anyone's ever done?
Well, I mean, yes, I don't think that jumping that far ahead right now makes a lot of sense when there's still opportunity at welterweight. But, you know, these guys are competitors. I've seen them in the room. I've seen them go with guys in the middleweight division. If something makes sense matchup-wise, that to me is what you have to look for, Mike, is like the matchup. What matchups make the most sense? What scenarios make the most sense for him? Now, are you going to throw him in there with Dricus or Sean Strickland right away? I don't know if that's a good call, but I think that welterweight move up does make a lot of sense. And unfortunately, it's against a guy that they love and respect in Bilal Muhammad. But I think you put your friendship aside and you go for greatness.
Yeah. So there's a lot that we want to talk to you about, Eric. Obviously, I'd like to talk about the Chris Curtis thing last week, get your thoughts on that. Sean Strickland's got a big fight coming up. Of course, we want to speak to you about that. But I personally want to know, and I'm sure a lot of people are interested, in your background, how you came to be where you are today. You mentioned Randy back in the day in Extreme Couture, of course. That's where you're now the head coach, massive stable of fighters. Give me your background, please. How did you? I was an
American football player, played college ball. Was at Reno, went to school in Utah. When I got done with football, came back home, and I honestly, man, I was just kind of a lost soul. Didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to school and really just stumbled across this gym, kind of walked in before the gym was technically open. Randy was getting ready for Tim Sylvia, met Mike Pyle, met Jay Haran, and those guys kind of took me under their wing and just started training with them with no real like, oh, this is what I want to be. I want to be a pro fighter. I just felt like I needed something, Mike.
That's like 06, 07?
Exactly, yeah. 06. So it was December of 06. The gym opened to the public, I think, February of 07. So I'd already been training a couple months with the guys, just like doing some grappling and touch bar or whatever else. And then when the gym opened, I was literally member number 1 at Extreme Couture. My first year here, there was an opportunity to coach a class. Randy was kind of strapped, needed somebody to coach. So I coached his class, and then he's like, man, I really like what you did. Why don't you make that your class? So I had like my one class every Friday. And then I just turned it into something bigger and better every time out. Started coaching more and more guys. And it wasn't until really Jay Haran was like, hey man, like, I think you have a path, really good path to get into coaching. You have an eye for the sport. You have a connection with people. You're a good motivator, all these things. But had it not really been for Jay, I don't know if I would have taken this path, especially a guy like Jay Haran, who I looked up to immensely, and a guy that like was highly respected in the room. Hearing that from Jay really kind of pushed me towards and looking into this path more and more. And, just like anything, Mike, it was just about getting reps, coaching the right guys, learning the hard way a lot of times. But, I'm 17 years now into the game, trained with a lot of good people, learned from a lot of good people. Ray Seffel being one of them. Ray really took me under his wing, Randy Couture, those guys. And had it not been for those guys, man, I'm not in this position I'm at today.
And Eric, you coming from the football background, and we've talked about this a lot, you bring that head coach mentality, right? Where you got to know everything. You got to do the film study. You're prepping things. You're planning things out. How much of an influence was being involved in that sport and the coaching style that they bring to the table and kind of upping it in MMA? Because we don't see that as much in MMA. Sure. Guys are usually former fighters, or they were a boxer and they're just teaching a part of the craft. But you kind of looked at it more as the head coach of a whole team, where there's still offensive and defensive coordinators that you now work with as an MMA coach. Explain that a little bit and how your mind works like that. And maybe that brought such a uniqueness to your style as an MMA coach.
Well, that's a great point too, Felder. And I think a lot of my insecurities were because I didn't have pro fights, and I felt like, how do I connect to these guys and how can I relate to them? And first and foremost was just being comfortable in my own skin and not making up bullshit stories and lies about, I had 200 street fights or this is that. I mean, I am who I am, but I can add value to what I need to do as a coach. And because of that, Ray Seffel brought up a great point to me very young. Ray's like, Eric, you're going to coach people according to what they need and who they are, whereas I coach people because of my style. So my style will rub off on somebody because it was the way I fought. He said, but you have a leg up because your style is going to be more universal. You learn from me, you learn from Dwayne Ludwig, you learn from this person, this person, this person. So you can take all those adaptations into knowing, how do you coach Paul Felder? How do you coach Dan Ige? So he said, you take those opportunities and understand. But the biggest thing for me, honestly, Paul, it was natural for me to go over into this sport with tape study because that's what I did in football. So I was looking at repetitions. I was looking at patterns, how are guys doing this, and this, body language. So I was trying to coach details that I felt like that were being overlooked by, maybe other MMA coaches. They were looking at certain other things, or they weren't even watching tape for that matter. And, early on, I got a lot of flack, like, oh, you're just a football coach. Well, maybe I just am, but I'm going to find ways to adapt and overcome those issues and try to find ways to evolve. And I think that sport has evolved over time. And now everybody watches tape and everybody looks at the kind of the same things I'm trying to find.
Well, the proof is in the pudding, isn't it? I mean, you clearly want to, I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass, but you're a very successful coach. You've got a huge stable of fighters. You can see the respect that the fighters have for you. And Paul and I and all the other commentators as well, it's our job to listen to the coaches. And I love the calls that you make and how you speak to the fighters and how you resonate with them.
And that fire sometimes comes out.
I love to see the fire. I love to see the fire. Speaking of the fire, come on, Chris Curtis, last week, talk us through it from your perspective.
I mean, honestly, I said this first and foremost, like that's on us to begin with. Like we shouldn't have been in that position to make Mark Smith make that call, right? You don't get head kicked there, the position, you don't get knocked over, so that puts us in a spot where Mark Smith had to make a call in the stoppage part. I didn't agree with the stoppage, like, dude, we've seen guys, I watched Beltran that same week, like guys are getting flatlined and Beltran is on them, making sure that they're out. It was nothing like that. But again, you put Mark Smith in a position to have to make that call in that moment. And unfortunately, dude, that's what happened. But my grievance, and I've talked to people about it, is the behind the scenes before the fight when Mark Smith comes in the back and he asks, is there any things that you guys are concerned about? And there's been more and more times this has happened with him. And that's why I was so upset. There was a fence grab against Sean Strickland when he fought Tafa that we told Mark in the back, yo, this guy grabs the fence.
Yeah.
He would rather get a point taken away than lose the position. So naturally, the guy's going to grab fence. How are you going to handle this when it happens? And he gives us two adaptations. Either it's a point or the position. So when the first infraction happens and neither one happens, then you're like, well, then what was the point of even having this conversation in the back? That's what's infuriating to me. So in the Chris Curtis fight, Chris Curtis says to him, when I start to put pressure on him, he's going to find ways to stall. Either it's by positionals or grabbing or eye pokes or whatever. Just we're letting you know this is what we're concerned about. And then Mark gives his adaptation to his rules, which are fair. It's like an umpire in baseball. What is your strike zone? And we're going to work around your strike zone. But when you don't do anything that you say, that's when we're like, bro, this is where the frustration comes in. So we saw the spitting of them out, peace out after the first round. Nothing too crazy, whatever. Then when Chris started getting downhill on him, there was the groin strike. Look right after the groin strike. What happens? Roman catches his breath. Then he comes back and cracks Chris with a good combination. That doesn't happen if you don't get a 30, 45-second break, right? Yeah. And then the same thing, yeah. Chris starts getting downhill again. Then there's the eye poke. Time, 30, 45 seconds goes by, and then Kopylov comes in, cracks him again. So the momentum, you're taking away our momentum in those moments that we told you prior to the fight would happen, and you did nothing about it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead. I was going to
say just along those lines, right? Because we're seeing it's getting bad with the fence grabs, and they're just kind of getting shook off. What is the solution, right? We talk about the eye pokes. I know accidents happen, but they happen too often, and it's because guys are literally sticking their fingers out. I see it every fight we call it. Michael sees it every fight we call it. We talk about it all the time.
On Saturday night versus Yuri, that was a bad one.
You're pulling the jab, but instead of pulling the jab, you don't have a boxing glove on. You've got to have the hands closed. I think they just, and let me know if I think they have to just start taking points with fouls to teach guys lessons. You start losing big fights because of stupid things like that. Guess what? Next time you come out to fight, your shit's going to be tight.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone over this a ton of times. I've talked to Jeff Mullen and different people about the resolution of this. My point is just the consistency behind it, right? Yeah. If you're going to tell us before the fight that you're going to take a point and then you don't, right? Then you watch the fighters, they're almost like looking at you like, wait, you told me, and now it takes them off their game. So just be consistent with whatever you're going to say that the call is. But I think if you start somehow, some way figuring out half point systems, so a point is a round. If you lose a point, you're down a round. But if there's maybe a half point system to where it's not, okay, first one's a half point, second one's a full point, right? So you're understanding that there is a deduction, but it maybe not be a complete full point. Maybe that's something that they can go towards. But again, are you rewriting the whole books? I don't know, but you're absolutely right. Because here's the first thing that Coach Nate said after on Monday's practice. He's like, I'm sick of this shit. If you get poked in the eye, then poke the guy right back. That's what we're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of understand that frustration because you're getting told one thing and then in the fight, a different thing happens completely. And the box, it's a boxing model. We know that the 10-9 must system came in from boxing, so we've kind of followed that. I do think we need some evolution. We sit there and we always say, well, the referees have a really tough job. And they do. They 100%. Do. And they have great intentions. But as you just pointed out, those kind of inconsistencies, they can't continue. And I know that's why you were so upset for Chris, because you're in there, you see these guys, the sacrifices they make, they work their goddamn asses off, they put everything into it. And then little things like that with the judges or little mistakes or human element comes in, mistakes happen, and then it not only costs them their paycheck, but it's the trajectory throughout the rest of the career. And then afterwards, they're like, do you know what? This game, it's not worth it. I'm getting over by the judges or the referees or whatever every single time. I love that half point suggestion. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys nailed it. You're looking at a guy who, tore his hamstring. He had a fight booked, so we're talking about like an 8-month camp. And we see it. We see it as coaches. We see it as training partners. We see it as fighters. The time and effort that these guys put in, and then it's left to the hands of a judge or a ref or to make that decision. But again, that's the game that we play. When it comes to judges, how can we be better? When it comes to referees, hey man, just be consistent of what you're going to call and how you're going to call it. If you're going to do it the same here, just be that the umpire. If the strike zone's the same for this guy, then make it the same for this guy over here too.
Yeah. If there was one change you could make today, if you had the authority, what would that be?
I would say more judges. I would say more judges. Give me 5 judges.
Yeah.
And maybe 2 off-site, like 3 judges cage side, 2 off-site, something like that. Then where they're wearing headphones and they don't, whatever. But let's get more judges in there. So like the wayward scorecards are just eliminated. So like, okay, this scorecard is so egregious, right? You have a 30-27, 30-27, then you got a 30-27 over here. That one goes away. Like that one's just, how did you even come up with that? That one goes away. So I think if you add judges to it, and then the second thing I'd say too, Mike, is having these guys speak to media after. And I think what that'll allow is not only and I'm not saying we're to point blame, but sometimes I talk to Mike Bell or I talk to Sal D'Amato and they explain their reasons. And I'm like, I didn't think of that, or I didn't see that. Right. But it gives it more of a human element on helping understand what they might have saw from their perspective. There's guys.
Sorry, just so people understand, you mean having the judges speak to media afterwards and explain their reasoning?
Sure. Make themselves available after the card. They go and talk
accountable.
Accountable. The thing that I think that they're worried about is they might say something and sound so inept or so like, oh my God, they don't know what they're talking about. That puts the pressure back on the commission, right? Yeah. Like, what did he just say? Like, there's no way, right? So it makes them accountable for them to understand why they're saying these things or what they're looking at during these positions, or maybe they saw something that I missed or I didn't see.
Yeah, but if they're going to say something that's so stupid and outlandish, then they shouldn't be there in the bloody first place.
There you go. Yeah, but why do they hide them?
Yeah.
That's why. Well, you know what I mean. So why do they hide them?
We're going down the rabbit hole, Brian. Come on. Oh shit, you're right though. But this is a very, very important conversation. Not that we're the first ones to have it, of course.
No, because
I mean,
you're right.
This sport is 40 years old. We're young. Yeah. We're still young in this sport. But how do you find ways to evolve and get better? And I think that is always going to be one of the glaring issues is judging and refereeing. I love that they have insert replay. I love that there's some different adaptations, but the judging has been flawed over the years. And look, we're such a young sport. Like baseball has insert replay now. It's 200 years old, this sport, right? Like there's ways to get better. There's ways to find ways to make the sport smoother.
Do you think an immediate point deduction or a half point deduction, which I do love, by the way, for an eye poke, regardless, if they watch it back and they see the fingers were out like that, sure. Right? That's it. We don't care. Point off. Do you think that's too harsh, or would you go with that?
I think whatever you do, it's got to be fair for both sides. That's all. Like if there's no warnings anymore and you're doing that. So when we got on the stool going into round 3. I don't know if you guys had on the replay, Chris Curtis leaned in my ear and he goes, dude, I can't see out of my right eye. And then he leaned over to Coach Nate. He goes, dude, I can't see. And we kept it under wraps because, if you say that loud enough and the doctor hears or whatever else, now we're looking at something different. But when he leaned in my ear and he says, I can't see out of my right eye, we don't get that back, right? Now you're fighting compromise from an illegal foul and the field is not level anymore, right? Yeah. So the only way that you can make the field level is now take a point. So now it's basically a draw for Chris if we go to the judges' scorecards, but it changes a little bit of our game plan or our approach as well. So that's the hard part, right? Is like, how do you level a foul? How do you take it back from the other person? There has to be a consistency on both sides. Eye poke here, boom, point. Eye poke there, boom, point, and then whatever. That's the way you got to do it, and that's the way you got to do it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's down the board and it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter if you're the challenger or the belt holder. If it happens and it's on replay, that's it. And if that's consistent, things will change. Guys will be more careful.
Right.
If the stakes are there, because you're right. Once you're poked, it doesn't matter if it's the warning or the point take there. It's still effing your fighter up. When you can't see, you have blurry vision, and we've all had it. Mike, I know damn sure you've had more than your share of issues.
I'm aware of this phenomenon.
Sorry. In case I know our fans are too. So yeah. But anyway, Eric, moving forward, let's get on positive. Obviously, Sean is getting back in there. What?
Let me jump in there because Sean Strickland, right? He's fighting next week, of course. UFC Sydney 312. I met Sean Millennia MMA years ago, right? And we sparred together.
Old Riverside.
Yeah. I sparred with him, and we had a good little spar. I went up there for Lorenz Larkin. It was nothing crazy, we didn't have a hard spar or nothing, and we had a nice little friendly spar. And Sean afterwards straight away goes, "Hey, by the way, I'm better on the ground." As if to say, like, hey, I gave you problems there. I'm even better on the ground. I'm like, and straight away, that was my introduction to Sean and who he is. And we sparred together and trained together for a while. Then he goes off to Las Vegas, links up with you. Fast forward a few years later, the man's a world champion. He's a controversial or a polarizing guy to a lot of people. But give us your version of Sean Strickland. Who is he to you?
He's an outcast. He's a renegade. I think he's a guy that had abandonment issues. Every gym that he showed up at, it was like he was expecting to get kicked out eventually. So he just used the resources as much as he could, and then he would move on to that next gym. So, my dad being one of my coaches, my dad coached football here forever. I kind of picked his brain on just kind of how to handle guys like him. And the first thing my dad told me is give him responsibility. He said, find ways to make him feel like he belongs. Give him self-actualization, like something that he feels like he can hang his hat on. So I started inquiring more to, hey man, I'm running this practice. Why don't you run a segment of this practice? Me? You want me to run some stuff? Yeah, bro, you're really good in this area. Why don't you run something? And then slowly but surely, he started to become more and more of a teammate, where before it was like we were a resource and he would just use as much as he could out of everybody and then move on to the next spot. But then he started to realize, I think, that he had this family here. And that's when I really started to see him flourish, Mike, to be honest with you. Like, hey, we're not going to leave you. We're not going to kick you out. You have a brash personality. We don't listen to half the shit you say anyway. But I mean, really, it was more about like coaching him on approach, on dialogue. How do you speak to Brad Tavares, right? Like when he's a team captain, like you're going to connect more people. You're going to catch more bees with honey than you are with shit, dude. Oh yeah, that makes sense, right? So he's a guy over the years. I think that like once he felt like he's been a part of this family, you see it translate more and more into his fight game. We didn't do a whole lot with him fight game wise. He's been the guy you've all known, right? Yeah. Like he's tough and he's durable and he's this and he's that. We've given him some more fight IQ scenario things that I think have helped him, but we lean heavy on who and what he is in our game planning.
Of course. And having a guy like Sean, who is like Michael's talking about, he's a character. Sean, every time I'm in there hitting pads with you or something, he's got something ridiculous to say.
Sure.
But even when you give him responsibilities,
I wonder what those could be.
I'll save them.
Yeah.
With the sparring with him and adding in more technical elements, what's the approach there? Because Sean's a guy that he's pretty upfront about it. I just want to fight. I just want to fight. What is your approach on getting him to think about other things, but while still keeping Sean?
Do it anecdotally, where like I can show him like, hey, look, this is where I felt like we lost track of winning the fight versus Dricus. I get it. It was a close decision, but for three guys that matter, they had Dricus. Two of them had Dricus winning that fight. So let's look back at what we saw, what we got away from, and where the add-ons that we were trying to be specific in, right? So it's like this, and this. And then he hates watching tape, but it's like, dude, do you want to win or not? Right? Like, I don't want to hear none of this. You don't want to watch this or that. We're trying to help you and show you these things. And then now it's about adapting him into the sparring. He doesn't really drill. I've got him drilling now. Like today, Dutch drills today. Come in. What a Dutch drill. It's reps, motherfucker. You're getting more and more reps. We're trying to help you gain these reps. And then when your body's moving and doing the things that we're asking you to do, you're more apt to do it live. Right. Yeah. So really, that's just been the biggest thing is like, I don't know, Paul. It's like this give and take with him sometimes. It's like, hey, all right, we'll let you spar 10 times this week, but you got to come to these sessions too to do this. Okay, I'm in. But man, I'll tell you what, we go back and watch the tape. We didn't do enough. And the thing I kept telling him, you fought Israel Adesanya with nothing to lose. You fought Dricus not to lose.
Yeah.
And you left.
That's where it always changes. That's where it always changes, and that's where people don't understand. And that's why I talk about these champions that go on these long runs. You got to give them so much respect, because every person that they fight, you are the key to changing their life, their universe, making them a legend, in their country or their city or whatever, millions of dollar paydays in the future, etc., etc. So obviously, he wants a different outcome. The first fight was very close.
Sure.
It's one of those fights you can make an argument both ways. If I'm looking at it, the reason Dricus got it, obviously he mixed in the takedowns. He was going forward. He had Sean on the back foot quite a few times, and he had the big swings and the massive shots, and they talk about damage all the time. So giving that into account, what do you do differently in this fight, and what is the approach in the training camp?
Well, not to give away too much, but I'll give you some things too, Mike, so first and foremost, you have to negate the forward pressure. You can't allow him to do his switch stances moving forward, like that blitzkrieg kind of this and that. What negates that? What do we get away from? We got away from the teep. The teep will stop a lot of that forward pressure, that forward movement, right? If he does get through, and Felder and I work on this a ton. We work on the car crash. So if this guy gets through all my length and this far away, and he gets to the inside, we got something waiting for you with the elbows. And then what happens when you do that? We can underhook into the takedowns and take this dude and put him on his back. Something that Brad Tavares did in the first round when they fought, and Brad was able to hold Dricus down and keep him on his back. So just what you said earlier, we see Sean Strickland in the gym out wrestling and out grappling damn near every person he goes with, but doesn't utilize that as a tool. So in the moments that we were taken down with Dricus, he hit a switch. Bro, take the switch and get on top. Don't disengage. Let's get some ride time ourselves, and let's get some damage back. Let's get some ride time on our end. So let's be a little bit more offensive when it comes to our style of wrestling as well. Dricus is taking you down and trying to hold you down. You're working your get up, hitting your switch. Dude, let's go and get our own. Let's get on top and let's get some of these new 12 to 6s in. Let's get these elbows in and get some damage off, So we need to put more scoring criteria in front of the judges, so it's not just the jab, right? Yeah. Hey, the jab was landing, it was looking great and everything else. But you remember, these judges are kindergartners, man. Like they gotta see sequence and glitter and colors and paint. You gotta paint a better picture. Yeah, and I'm not saying that to be exactly. I'm not saying that the word kindergartner is like they're not smart. They gotta see things that they can appeal to. And if you just give them a jab, bro, they're going to get lulled to sleep, right? Yeah, it's landing and it's working. The guy's face is beat up, but let's add a jab switch kick and add some other things into your arsenal so they have a better scoring criteria that they can take back to the scorecards.
Yeah, it just makes it look more MMA, especially appealing to somebody. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Because you can land 15, 20 jabs in a round that may have been picture perfect, but if a guy goes out and lands an overhand right followed by a double, even though that's less damage technically,
true.
It's like, oh, wow, that was a big moment. So,
and the other thing too, Mike, is like the thing that Sean does so well in rounds 4 and 5 is he goes so hard in the last 30 seconds of those rounds, right? So hard. And I love that. And now what we're telling him, hey, let's do that in the first 30 seconds earlier. Let's do it in the middle and then always do it at the end. But let's give these judges going, ooh, that was nice. And then now they're tailed on to something else. And then we're doing it at the end of the rounds and then at the end of the fight. But let's not just save it for later, because that's what we keep doing. Like, and then guys are like,
the end.
Yeah, they were giving me shit because they thought, like, when I was saying, like, dude, I don't know what these scores are versus Costa, right? And they're like, Sean's washing it. Bro, it was a split decision. It was a split decision because you were just barely doing enough to get that win. Maybe the commentators all thought it was a wash, not the judge. One judge had it the other way.
Yeah, no, you're right though. Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. When you, obviously somebody that's coached multiple fighters now against Dricus, there's a lot of people, again, that don't know what the hell they are talking about. And they say, Dricus isn't very good. He's just not technical and this. I'm like, What are you talking about? It might not be the most Floyd Mayweather-esque mover. The man is effective as hell, strong as hell. He lands shot. He doesn't get tired. He can wrestle his head off. I'm answering the question for you, but what's your opinion? How do you kind of break Dricus down as a fighter?
He's got so much heart and self-belief in what he does. Right. And he's truly one of those guys when you watch him, like he's really willing to die in there, like the way that he fights. And you nailed it. Like if you're sparring a guy who's clean and precise, sometimes those guys are the easier guys to spar. But we call guys like that a booger, right? Like they're just awkward. They're just
they hit you with shit that shouldn't work.
Yeah. Should not work. But what happens is when he's not clean and concise, the punches come from weird angles. The defense comes from weird angles. There's just things for you to. It takes a hard time to get control over, and I think that's why Sean was successful against Izzy, because Sean has his awkwardness, and I think that's why Dricus is successful against guys like that too, because the punches come from weird angles. His movement is awkward and weird, but it's effective. Right. It's just that big step overs and loops and everything else coming from all different positions with his hands down. But goddamn it, he does it well.
Yeah. He's a son of a bitch with that stuff, man. Every time he throws a rear punch, I won't even say a right hand because it switches sometimes. Yeah. The back foot is usually not even planted on the ground. It's like everything we don't teach to people. But again, you talk about just the mentality, right? And you got to prepare for that too, right? You've got to let your guy know. Like Sean's now knows because he's been in there with him. It's like, listen, this dude can get hit with he wants to win bad.
Yep.
That's you got to be ready for.
You nailed it, Paul. So the first thing Sean said to me after we watched the last fight, the tape, he said, I got outdogged. He goes, I just got outdogged. And I go, you did, man. I go, you nailed it, bud.
And that's big for Sean to admit that.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps to know that going into the next one, like, oh shit, I got to find that in me again.
Yeah.
Because I showing the gym, the ring, the cage with Sean as much as I did when we were training, this won't surprise you, Eric, but we used to butt heads a little bit.
He loves you, by the way, Mike. Loves you.
He's the man. No, same here.
No,
that's
I know, but in the room.
That's why I always loved it, because it was like, you know where you stand. He's going to be honest. And I love that about him. I'd rather that than someone that says one thing to your face and then says another one the moment you walk out of the room.
Bullshit.
I 100%. Hate that. There's a certain honor in that. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
And I could not be happier for the success that he's had, and I truly mean that.
No, he is, and that's the thing about him, man. He's as real as he's going to get. Believe it, love him, hate him, whatever. You don't have to follow him on Twitter, but I'll tell you what, he's early. He takes care of his training partners. He trains hard. He stays late. He's here cornering guys. He'll travel on the road to corner guys. He loves his team and loves his gym, and that's all I can ask for.
Well, listen, we'll let you go there, Eric. We got another guest jumping on in a minute. I'm going to see you in Australia. Tell Sean to say hi.
All right.
The best with the rest of the camp. Oh, brother, I can't wait. We're going to be.
You coming, Felder?
Where?
Australia.
Sydney? No.
Bro.
I got to go to Saudi. You're not going to Saudi, I guess. Eh?
Oh, bro. You got no luck in Saudi, pal. No old fashions for you.
I'm going to Saudi and Sydney.
No old fashions for you, Felder.
No, man, nothing. Nothing, dude.
My brother.
Hey,
preparing myself.
Should Paul be coming back for one more fight? What do we say?
Oh, you already know, bro. Me and him go over this shit every time. We'll hit pads for 3 weeks straight. Every time after, he's like, you think I still got it? Yeah, Paul, you never lost it. Let's go. One more run, right? And then listen, there's no disrespect. The Cowboy's coming back, and I know Cowboy and him are boys. That's the fight. Make that happen. Let's go, bro.
God, what's he fighting at? 185?
Who cares? Who cares? Let's go, Felder. You son of a bitch.
All right, let's go.
Do this. Come on, Paul.
No, I got to swim.
I'm signing off on it. I'm coming back as well.
Let's go. Let's corner Mike. We'll corner Felder, and then we'll corner Felder, and I will corner you. And we'll just take these dogs out, baby. Let's go.
That sounds amazing. Right. Hey, listen, once this net gets back up to speed, I'd love to come in and get a bit of work one day, Eric.
Please, bro. Please. I'd love to have you in here, man. Like, all I ask is when you come in, bro, you show something to the gym, because I think it's such a great resource. We get Felder comes in, he hits pads. Hey, Paul, show us a couple things. And the whole gym, I just got goosebumps. The whole gym benefits from it, man. It's amazing.
Of course.
And they'd love it for you, Mike. If you did that, oh man.
I would love to.
Cool. We'll go together.
Let me think of something I've got first, though. I make it all up off the top of my head. I don't know what I'm doing.
You're a dog, bro. Whatever you want. We'll be honored. We'll be honored.
We got to do this again, man. Hey, you've got your own podcast as well. Just give that a shout out. Where can people watch that?
Yeah, the Versus podcast. I've had Felder on. I'll get you on sometime too, Mike. Please. I'd love to have you and talk story. We'll have Kevin Lee on this week, and then the following week will be Max Crosby. So check us out.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Right on.
Very cool.
Eric, best of luck with the rest of the camp. See you soon, no doubt. And
thank you, boys.
Thanks again for your time.
Thanks. All right, we'll see you in Australia. Not you, Paul.
Safe travels.
Later,
buddy. One of the nicest guys.
He's the man, dude.